So let's go back to about 3 or 4 months ago. So many celebs decided to open their mouth while the world was burning, and one of those celebs was Lanadelrey. So, total disclaimer, I was a huge fan of Lana. Was is definitely highlighted right now. Question for the culture. Now that DojaCat, Ariana, Camilla, Cardi B, Kalani, and Nicki Minaj and Beyonce have had number ones with songs about being sexy, wearing no clothes, effing, cheating, etc., can I please go back to singing about being embodied, feeling beautiful by being in love even if the relationship is not perfect, or dancing for money or whatever I want without being crucified or saying that I'm glamorizing abuse? I'm fed up with female writers and alternative singers saying that I glamorize abuse, when in reality, I'm just a glamorous person singing about the realities of what we are all now seeing are very prevalent, emotionally abusive relationships all over the world. With all of the topics women are finally allowed to explore, I just want to say over the last 10 years, I think it's pathetic that my minor lyrical exploration detailing my sometimes submissive or passive roles in my relationship have often made people say, I've set women back 100 years. Let this be clear, I'm not a feminist, but there has to be a place in feminism for women who look and act like me. The kind of woman who says no, but men hear yes. The kind of woman who are slated mercilessly for being their authentic, delicate selves. The kind of women who get their own stories and voices taken away from them by stronger women or men who hate women. I've been honest and optimistic about the challenging relationships I've had. Newsflash, that's just how it is for many women. And that was sadly my experience, up until the point that those records were made. So I just want to say, it's been a long 10 years of BS reviews up until recently, and I've learned a lot from them, but I also feel it really paved the way for the other women to stop putting on a happy face and to just be able to say whatever the heck they wanted to in their music. Unlike my experience, where if I even expressed a note of sadness in my first two records, I was deemed literally hysterical, as though it was literally the 1920s. Anyways, none of this has anything to do about much, but I'll be detailing some of my feelings in my next two books of poetry, mostly the second one, with Simon and Scooster? Sorry. Yes, I'm still making personal reparations with the proceeds of the books to my choice of Native American foundations, which I'm very happy about. And I'm sure there will be tinges of what I've been pondering in my new album. That comes out September 5th. Thanks for reading. Happy quarantining. So the internet was very mad about this. A lot of people made videos, responses. A lot of people were making responses on Twitter, remarks on Twitter. People were dragging her. And also people were actually trying to let her know, hey, this isn't the best thing to say. So then she had a response to the naysayers.
Hey, so I don't want to beat a dead horse and I don't want to, go on and on about this post thing, but I just want to remind you that in that post, my one and only personal declaration I've ever made, thanks for being so warm and welcoming, was about the need for fragility in the feminist movement. It's gonna be important. And when I mentioned women who look like me, I didn't mean white like me. I mean the kind of women who, other people might not believe because they think, oh, well, look at her, she fucking deserves it or whatever. There's a lot of people like that, and I just think it's sad that the women I mentioned about, whether they'd sing about dancing for money or whatever, the same stuff, by the way, that I've been singing about and chronicling for 13 years. That's why I'm in that echelon. Yes, they are my friends and peers and contemporaries. The difference is when I get on the pole, people call me a whore, but when Twigs gets on the pole, it's art. So, I'm reminded constantly by my friends that lyrically there are layers and complicated psychological factors that play into some of my songwriting, but I just want to say, the culture is super sick right now, and the fact that they want to turn my posts, my advocacy for fragility, into a race war, it's really bad. It's actually really bad, especially when in that same declaration I was talking again about the idea of how important it is to make reparations to the Navajo community, because they touched me so much in my youth, and that I believe in personal reparations because it's the right thing to do. And I think what's really sad is, like, as a personal advocate, as a girl's girl, as somebody who wants the best for every culture, when Marianne Williamson was talking about reparations to the black community that never got done during the emancipation period, that was why I liked her, because I always felt that way. So I just want to say to all of the other women out there who are like me, good girls, good intentioned, who get fucked up the ass constantly by the culture just because you say what you really mean. I'm with you, and I feel for you, and I know that you feel for me, and I'm super strong. You can call me whatever. I'm sorry that I didn't add one 100% Caucasian person into the mix of the women that I admire, but it really says more about you than it does about me. And I think that what's interesting is the very first time I decided to tell you anything about my life, or the fact that I'm writing books that chronicle that fragility, that 200,000 hateful, spiteful comments come in, and my phone number leaked, and comments like, you fucking white bitch, it's the opposite of the spirit of an advocate. It's what causes fragility, but it's not gonna stop me, period. So I just want to say, nobody gets to tell your story except for you, and even if that means it's kind of messy like this along the way, because unfortunately, when you have a good heart, it doesn't always shine through, and you trudge on anyway. You make those personal reparations to heal your own family karmic lineage and the sickness of this country. Domestic abuse, mental health problems is the second epidemic that's arising out of this pandemic. It's a real thing. That's what I was talking about. So, as ever, I'm grateful that my muse is still here, and that I have, over the last 3 years, been blessed to have the insight and ability to channel 2 books worth of beautiful poems. And, I think my new record, Chemtrails Over the Country Club, is special as well. And, I'm sorry that a couple of the girls I talked to, who were mentioned in that post, have a super different opinion of, my insight, and especially because we've been so close for so long. But it really, again, makes you reach into the depth of your own heart and say, well, am I good intentioned? And of course, for me, the answer is always yes. I barely ever share a thing. And this is why, and the reason why I'm making this post, and I know it seems a bit much, right? But there are women out there like me who have so much to give, and, don't quite get to the place spiritually or karmically where they're supposed to be, because there are other women who hate them and try and take them down, whether in my case it's certain alternative singers, or malintended journalists, or men who hate women, but I'm not the enemy, and I'm definitely not racist, so don't get it twisted. Nobody gets to tell your story except for you, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, and many people have commented on this matter, usually saying the same thing. No offense to them, it's just the truth. People have made fun of Lana's music and said she's irrelevant, which, if you are not a fan of indie pop, you will not know her music. The end. Don't bring that down. I've been a fan of Lana since 2012, so I'm pretty well versed on her music career, and the scrutiny she went through, or received I should say, and other things. But if I have to be honest, Lana Del Rey has never received the same amount of criticism as the women she has mentioned, mainly the black women she's mentioned, when it came to embodying sexiness. That's just a complete lie. For one, black women are more pressured by society and by the industry to sell sexiness and coolness, and Lana Del Rey, along with most white women entertainers, can sell sexy. But they can also sell cool, sweet, teeny bop princess, goth, quirky, ethereal. Anything you can name, a white women entertainer has embodied that.
So sorry that I'm about to reference myself, not really, you know that I do this work, but in my video called Why Do Black Women Have to Sell Sex, I went through the Billboard charts, right, multiple Billboard charts. I watched the videos of the songs, I listened to the songs, and I found that black women performers were much more likely to have songs and videos that were explicitly sexual, whereas performers of other races, and on those charts it's predominantly white women, they get to do a wide range of things, from the explicitly sexual, you know, y'all know Miley, right, to soft and sweet and young and demure and teeny bopper pop. Black women are in a very, very narrow box. That's concerning.
Black women don't have that free reign. Lana has created her whole sound off of black women and hip-hop before selling her sad girl dream pop. If you don't believe me, look up her unreleased music. She even does features on songs with ASAP Rocky, Smiler, a rapper from the UK. She even does songs where she raps on her own song. Before she was famous, she made many songs similar to the women she mentioned in her post. Many songs with the same topics about being sexy and taking off your clothes. She made music about that. But the difference is she can do that and then make a whole new album where she's doing the music she does right now. That's being seen as critically acclaimed music. Yeah, her music is seen as critically acclaimed. She does have very, very good reviews. She's had some bad ones, of course. What woman entertainer has not had horrible reviews? But she's gotten a lot of positive feedback over the past few years. But one thing no one has touched on relates to the fact that there are black women singers who have made music very similar to Lana Del Rey, and some have come out before her. They will most likely not receive the same level of fame as Lana, and they will most likely not headline Coachella shows. Let's look at 3 artists right now. So first we'll look at an artist named Denisha Odaji, who makes very similar music to Lana, and also the XX, which is a dream pop rock band. Next we'll look at Tannerelli, who actually sings very similarly to Lana Del Rey. Her voice is very similar to Lana Del Rey's voice, or at least the style of her singing is similar. And we'll also look at Abra. So Abra is an artist that makes the sad girl pop music. It's not exactly like Lana Del Rey's music, but it's still in a very unique category when it comes to alternative indie pop. If you Google these 3 artists to identify the type of music they make, all but Denisha are listed as R&B artists. And yes, they also have other genres listed, such as Abra. She has indie pop listed and synth pop listed, but she still has R&B listed. Tannerelli has soul and R&B listed. Nothing about synth pop, indie pop, alternative pop. I'm sure you get the picture. If you Google Lana Del Rey, you will see that the genres that are listed for her are rock, dream pop, indie pop, alternative pop, or baroque pop. However, you don't see R&B or hip hop listed as a genre for Lana Del Rey. And like I have stated before, Lana Del Rey has experimented with R&B and hip hop way more than the other 2 artists that are identified as being R&B artists when it comes to the list of their genres. How can that be? Can it be that Lana has more privilege as a white woman to experiment with her sound, embrace her sexuality more easily without being boxed as urban? And I would say yes. But why is this the case in music? Why are black women boxed in the music industry? Why is it so hard to accept that black women in genres outside of hip hop, R&B, and soul exist? Because there are plenty of black women and femmes making music outside of those genres. And why, when you look up alternative pop or rock as a category, and let's say you wanted to research more artists, the artists that pop up are overwhelmingly white. The only black woman that I have seen listed under alternative pop music is Solange. I'm not even kidding. So my question is, can black women sell pop, rock, or alternative music? In this video, I will also cover some of the rappers that have dabbled in pop music or any other genres, because there are several rappers who do this regularly. Although MTV began with a rock format in mind, the popularity of pop music, hip-hop, and R&B among the general public left the network no choice but to diversify its playlists. During the 1990s, hip-hop and R&B became increasingly popular amongst the mainstream audience. Bill Clinton became our Democratic president in 1992. Some people nauseatingly called him the Black President, which is definitely not the case today. But black culture was embraced again. Still segregated, but embraced like how we saw in the 1970s. We had so many black women R&B artists that entered the charts, such as Brandy and Aaliyah for the kids, Monica, who was younger but made for adult R&B fans. We had Toni Braxton, Escape, TLC, SWV, black girl entertainers galore. If you wanted rap, we had a plethora of black women who were rappers in the early to mid 1990s. Salt-N-Pepa, MC Lyte, Queen Latifah, Lil' Kim, Foxy Brown, Missy Elliott, Da Brat, and some of these artists crossed over to daytime television, and they also starred in movies. Black people were very visible in pop culture during the 90s, and some of this visibility crossed over to mainstream pop culture. And our black platforms were thriving. We had black TV shows, movies, magazines, music, TV, radio stations. And while these platforms existed in the 1970s and in the 1980s, these platforms were growing in such popularity that crossovers were happening at a higher rate than before. And so many black women artists were becoming household names. And if you look at the Billboard charts, they were filled with black women artists. However, towards the late 90s into the 2000s, R&B was becoming less and less popular on the mainstream stations, and we had a slew of blonde bombshells sell teeny bop music. This included Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Jessica Simpson, Mandy Moore, and Hoku. There were several pop boy bands as well that were taking the world by storm. Black women singers were still able to get mainstream success, but their sound had to have a pop vibe and assimilate with the pop girls, but still had to be R&B enough to play on the black stations. And if it sounds like a complicated algebra equation, it basically was. In 2000, we had Samantha Mumba, who was marketed as a strictly pop artist from Ireland, but she disappeared faster than you can say her name and got very little press. In the late 1990s and in 2000, black women rappers were mainly popular within the hip-hop audiences, and the rappers who carried out the feminine HOE aesthetics were pretty much the only image of female rappers we were left with. And this brings us to the 2000s. While teen pop music rose in popularity at the tail end of the 1990s, it also sort of died down by the year 2001. Hip-hop grew in massive popularity in about 2002, and in 2001, rock also made a comeback, and pop's focus was now angsty and alternative rock music. Bands like Linkin Park became popular, and Avril Lavigne, Michelle Branch, and Pink were the faces of the women in pop. Anti-blonde bombshell pop was the big thing now. Britney took on a pop R&B approach by collabing with the Neptunes. However, hip-hop was growing in popularity year by year, and something that helped hip-hop really make a breakthrough to pop radio in the early 2000s was the sensitive thug music, where an R&B woman singer would sing the hook. So the J-Lo and Ja Rule collab, which was really Ashanti, we will get into that a little later, really helped with hip-hop breaking through to pop radio even more at that time. Ashanti and other black women artists really thrived in this type of music at that time. Like I said in my Little Kim video, from about 2000 to 2001, certain R&B artists and singles made it to the mainstream pop stations, while some stayed on the R&B and hip-hop platforms. From about 2002 to the mid-2000s, most R&B songs needed hip-hop to accompany it in order for it to be taken to mainstream pop. And it was especially marketable to have a male rapper as a feature. Two black women who tried to break out of R&B during the early to mid-2000s was Kelis and Nivea. Kelis was especially criticized for not making music that was suitable for her black audience, and her team had marketing problems. They didn't know whether to play her music on BET or rap stations. Was it considered R&B? And this infuriated Kelis at the time.
People are always trying to put you in a category and say, oh, well, you're this and you're that, and it's really irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Who cares if it's rock or hip hop or R&B? What difference does it make? Do you feel it? You know what I'm saying? If I can make you feel it, then I don't care what you call it. I mean, and you look at my album and look at the CDs I have in my CD changer. It doesn't mean anything. It just says this. All these things make up who I am. I don't think I should have to choose or say I'm more this or I'm more that. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, I think I have a clear-cut direction as to where it is that I'm going, but I don't think it has to have already been mapped out. I'm not trying to follow in anybody else's footsteps. I'm trying to do my own thing. You know what I mean? I don't think it has to be rock. I don't think it has to be anything. I am what I am.
In a 2018 interview with BET, Nivea stated they would boo the HELL out of me. I was pop, hip-hop, R&B with colored hair in 2002. That was whack. When my second album came out, still no black radio stations was effing with me. They wasn't playing. They was like, be YouTube pop. While hip-hop was growing in popularity, women rappers were not especially as popular as they are today. There were several women rappers who came out, such as Missy Elliott, Lil' Kim, and Trina, and also Eve, with a couple hits here and there, but others tended to be one-hit wonders. At this time, everyone wanted a piece of hip-hop. It was extremely profitable. And going back to J-Lo, she thrived in the sensitive thug-type music department. And with several Billboard hits, the industry gave her songs that were pre-recorded in the early 2000s by other black women artists such as Ashanti and Christina Milian. Soon the industry realized they could market the sound and look of black women musicians and give them to non-black artists. The industry thought it would be more marketable to sell non-black women to white audiences who wanted the pop R&B sound. By the mid-2000s, Fergie was greatly excelling with her black and brown bandmates in the Black Eyed Peas. Gwen Stefani's solo career embodied black women's aesthetics and hip-hop culture in 2005, while literally using Harajuku girls as props. We also had Nelly Furtado make a highly charted rap pop song, Promiscuous Girl, with Timbaland. Black women artists were becoming a scarcity, and some R&B acts did well, but many came and went during the mid to late 2000s. This included Keisha Cole, A. Marie, Monica, Alicia Keys, Beyonce, and Ciara, who all had some notable R&B mainstream hits from about 2004 to 2006 or 2007. During the mid to late 2000s, people were getting acquainted to indie pop and indie rock acts on a global level. Some of these acts entered the Billboard charts. And at this time, the internet influenced how we consumed music, especially on a global level. Indie pop women from the UK included Amy Winehouse, Lily Allen, Duffy, Adele, Kate Nash. From Canada, there was Feist. And from America, we had Regina Spektor and Ingrid Michaelson, among others. Some of these artists, not all, embraced elements of black music such as reggae, R&B, and soul, and black aesthetics to make themselves more edgy. Imperfect, unladylike women were the thing at this time. But this was definitely not the case for black women or women of color in general. Estelle was a black pop R&B artist from the UK who made a big pop hit with American Boy, but the urban audience was very critical about her looks and her skin color. Some black women tried to do the folk or aesthetic guitar sound, but they were still sold as soul or R&B. As we approached 2008, R&B was literally dying before our eyes. Black women especially struggled because they were usually placed in R&B and soul, and black women were not progressing in hip-hop as black men were. Internet file sharing services were more common, and the world accessed music from online platforms. Radio and TV were not the only ways people were getting acquainted to their music. And the line between black music and white music was starting to blur at this point. In a way, this harmed a lot of black women and R&B acts as a whole because everyone had to assimilate to one central sound in order to be heard. The need to have a mainstream pop hit grew even larger, and some acts could not keep up. BET and urban radio platforms could not save black artists and market them to the black audience like in the 1980s and the 1990s. Some of the black women artists who were able to assimilate their sound included Carrie Hilson, Beyonce, Rihanna, and Danny D. Kane, which was a multiracial girl group. A black girl group, Cherish, did a pop R&B mix, but their success didn't last for a very long time. Mariah Carey also had several hits. Hip-hop still managed to stay afloat, but its sound had to change significantly in order to assimilate to the electro-pop focus. But the death of R&B significantly changed and affected black women artists. I will talk about the 2010s in another video. Just know that streaming has increased in massive popularity, and this has caused the music industry to completely shift gears and narrow size when it comes to the musicians that we're invested in. So going into my reasons on why this is happening, why black women are restricted in the music industry. First reason, genre is racialized. If you are a black woman musician, you will be placed in R&B, hip-hop, or soul, especially the subgenre of neo-soul if you do not fit any of the categories listed prior. Today, the alternative R&B category is the new neo-soul dumpster category. And there's nothing wrong with these categories. There are great artists who make great music in these categories, in these genres. But if we taken a step back and asked ourselves what this genre is and why is a specific artist placed in this genre, especially if they are black. FKATwigs, the artist that Lanadelrey compared her lack of privilege to, expressed her frustration after realizing she was placed in the alternative R&B category. During an interview with The Guardian in 2014, she stated that when she first released music, no one knew what she looked like. She would read comments about her music stating that people had never heard anything like that before. Her music was not a genre. When her picture was revealed 6 months later, she was then categorized as an R&B singer. In her own words describing her music, she stated, "It's punk, F alternative R&B." And she's not wrong. I've even seen categories in the 1980s describing certain black women artists as electronic soul. What's that? We can even see this with Lizzo's 2019 song Juice, which was also categorized as being R&B. I do think that this is a marketing strategy, and I will talk about this later in my next point. I think society racializes black women, black people in general, but black women specifically when it comes to singing music or being musicians, I should say. When society sees a black woman sing, there's the stereotype that it's soulful, that it's rhythm and blues, and that's just pretty much it. And the industry knows this, and we will get into the marketing part in a bit, but I do think this influences the way that music is put in a specific genre. And this also goes for the category of hip hop. If you're a black woman and you're being angsty and you're not specifically singing, you might have some kind of rap flow. You don't get the same privilege as a white woman to be categorized as maybe a pop rap song or something like that. You're automatically just seen as hip hop, and the end. And this brings me to my next point, the marketing of black women. So we saw in the 2000s how the music industry really felt that taking chances on black women would harm their pockets. That's why you saw the popularity of white women doing black women-esque things. Today we do have a lot of black women artists. However, we are seeing a lot of similarities when it comes to the sound that is being marketed, and we're seeing a lot of similarities with the aesthetics. We're also seeing a rise in genre bending. So like I said before, we do have a lot of rappers doing pop music as well, especially with DojaCat and Rico Nasty as well. She's doing like the pop music, the metal-esque music, but the people who become mainstream have to have a very specific aesthetic and sound, usually incorporating the HOE aesthetics, which again is a term coined by Raquel Savage from B Media. So this pretty much means the industry will not really take chances on an Abra, on a Tannerelli, on a, let's see, Denisha, on a Namasenda. And I love the mainstream aesthetic and sound for black women, but the industry generally invests in black women who use a specific aesthetic and sound suitable for the urban audience. A great example of this today is Normani. After leaving the group Fifth Harmony, a lot of people have been discussing what is going on with Normani's career and the direction her team has for her, because she's pretty much stagnant at this point, and it's been very frustrating to a lot of people. However, it has been revealed that her team has been trying to push her to the urban market for the urban audience. Her team even turned down opportunities from the Chainsmokers and Anne-Marie just so she can be marketed as an R&B artist so that the urban market would be accepting of her. And that's so unfortunate. And her song with Sam Smith, Dancing with a Stranger, was so widely accepted, it went up to number 7 on the Billboard charts. So even with evidence that she can sell pop music, they still don't want to take that chance. And this is very similar to what Kelis went through, what Samantha Mumbo went through. They still went through these issues even though they have produced very successful singles. There was always the fear on marketing. How do we market these black women? How do we do it? How do we keep this going? And colorism plays a huge role in this. It's going to be way worse for somebody who is darker skinned. Normani is darker skinned. We saw what happened to Estelle when she did her song American Boy. She was criticized up and down. And that's going to lead me into my next point. The response of the urban audience, aka the black audience. A current example that we can definitely use is Lizzo. Lizzo was more so of an indie electropop artist. She had a following. I started hearing Lizzo's music in about 2014, 2015. In 2019, the promotion for 'Cause I Love You was poppin'. Her team put money and energy and a lot of work behind everything with this promotion process. This is the way you promote an album. Her first single was Juice, like I said before. That was promoted as an R&B song. I do not agree with that, and we know why. We've talked about that. But her song Truth Hurts really, really made it big. This song really took off because of the movie Someone Great. That was a Netflix movie that featured this song, and also because of TikTok. So again, great promotion strategies. But as she became more popular, she had a huge following, and that following had a lot of white women that were attached to it. I'll also add in white gays. So like white women and white gays were really into her music, or that's what people perceived from her success. And then the tweets came out. So the black audience started to criticize Lizzo's music and say things like, if she appeals to white people, why would I want to listen to that music? People were identifying her weight and her blackness to being like a mammy and being like somewhat like an Uncle Tom figure. So for this example, we did have someone where the industry took a chance on this entertainer, and she was not the aesthetic or sound that I mentioned before, and the team still pushed her. However, the black audience was not very accepting of this. They were not accepting of the fact that she was making music that appealed to white people, and that was not considered your generic R&B or hip-hop music. And if you've seen my 1980s video on black women of the 1980s, you'll see that something very similar happened to Whitney Houston, and Whitney Houston is not a fat black woman. I do think Lizzo's skin color and body size definitely influences the way people have perceived her. But I think this comes down to how society, and especially the black community, has been taught to digest black women. There have been plenty of black male artists who have created pop music and music outside of R&B and even hip-hop for some instances, or at least traditional hip-hop. We've had plenty of black male artists who have had very diverse fan bases and very white fan bases. We've had Tyler the Creator, Kid Cudi, Frank Ocean, Travis Scott. If we're talking about the 80s, we've had Michael Jackson, we've had Prince. I've never seen black men criticized for having a large white fan base, for making pop music, for making music outside of the realms of R&B or hip hop. I've only seen negative criticism towards black women. I've even started to see some of this criticism for Normani. Some people have said some of her songs are just too pop, they're too white, they're not true to her black fan base. Why does that have to take place? I think as a societal whole, it causes a lot of discomfort to see black women acting out as fully fleshed out human beings and not catering to certain stereotypes. And this is something we all have to take time to undo and unlearn, so we can digest black women in all sorts of different genres, all sorts of different aesthetics, and all sorts of different spaces. And this can happen if the promotion works, if the team believes in that artist, and we've seen this happen with Santa Gold. She came out around the time all of those indie girls came out, and she's done relatively well. She stayed true to her sound, and there was no discussion of how are we going to specifically market this black woman. They just did the promotion and they just worked with her, and it ended up doing very well. And although she is identified as being alternative hip hop for one of her genre categories, I'll take it, whatever. She does do a little bit of hip hop in her songs, I guess. She has not gotten lost in the sauce, and she stayed true to her audience, the audience that cared about her, no matter who those people of her audience were. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I've just never seen any racial tension when it came to her as an artist and her promotion. Yeah, of course, she's a black woman, she's a dark-skinned black woman. I'm sure she's gone through her fair share of racism in the industry. She's even done a song with Kanye West, and she still hasn't been predominantly marketed as a hip-hop artist. So it can be done, people. The music industry has been significantly shifting and changing since the 2000s. The internet has really influenced this transition. So people have created their own little worlds when it comes to adapting to specific music, which is great. But it's still very, very odd that we're seeing some of the same similarities when it comes to black women being placed in specific genres, black women becoming mainstream. We're seeing a lot of the same things as we did in the 1980s. And I would just say stream, which yes, I am going to mention some artists in the comment section. I'm going to list some artists that we really need to be mindful of and we really need to support. But we really need to be cognizant of some of the things that we have been taught and try to unlearn some of the things that we've been taught initially about how we view black women and what black women should look like, should sing like, should be like. It really does stunt our creative abilities. From Alice Walker's essay, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, she discloses how the political, economic, and social restrictions of slavery and racism have historically stunted the creative lives of black women, and I couldn't agree more. The music industry is always going to be trash. We just need to accept that. It's always going to be racist, it's always going to be sexist, but we are also responsible for who we decide to support. And there's nothing wrong with the black women who are out today in the mainstream lens at all. I love them. But we can also support Amerisue, Abra, Denicia, Tanarelli, Kalila, Bree Runway, and more. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Thanks.